What's going on, guys? Welcome to another video in our course, make.com, but for people who want to make real money. And it is a balmy minus 20 degrees or so in Calgary. I thought I would put on my favorite winter sweater and record a video today on iterators and aggregators. This is going to be everything that you need to know in a practical sense to succeed with iterators and aggregators and make.com. I find way too many people diving way too deep into this for basically no reason, because you're only ever going to use iterators like 10 or maybe 15% of the time. So we're going to focus on like a real practical application for an accounting firm, and we're just going to try and make this as simple as possible. I'm going to not tell you, but I'm going to show you how they work, and then hopefully you're going to pattern match this into your own flows and then do something cool and make a bunch of money with it. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stay tuned and let's get into it. Okay, so not going to lie, I did record an entire video for about 35 minutes right before I did this. And then I realized that OBS was not on. So I'm going to be doing this again, and hopefully it's going to be way higher quality than it was before. What we're going to be doing here is I have an example spreadsheet set up, and we're going to pretend that we're building out a flow for a client that wants maybe some accounting automation. And it's going to be a really simple flow. I'm going to keep it as dumb as humanly possible because the focus of this is going to be on how to use iterators and aggregators. But essentially what we want to do is just like once a month, we want to send the client an email just telling them what their net cash in was. And the way that we're going to do this is we're basically going to plug this into a make.com scenario, and then we're just going to add up everything in the amount column here. So, classic spreadsheet, right? You have the name of the transaction, you have like the date added. This is in like date time format, which we'll touch on. And then you also have the amounts. All we're going to be doing is just going to be summing this up. And I mean, like Google Sheets already does this for you. Look at the bottom. Well, you probably can't see because my face is there. But in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, like when you mouse over stuff in Google Sheets, it literally shows you like summary value. So right now it's saying the sum is 287.74, for instance. So we're basically going to be doing this, and then we're just going to like attach this to a one-step email, and that email is just going to be sent out to a hypothetical business owner and just say, hey man, in the last month you made X dollars. Great. So that's going to be the whole idea, and that's what we're building out. Now, again, I've already built this flow out, so I'm just going to create a new one. We're just going to pretend I'm building it from scratch. And I'm going to pay close attention to my camera to make sure that shit doesn't happen again. Okay, so what I have here is a new make.com scenario. I'm going to open up Google Sheets because we're going to be pulling the data from Google Sheets. And then the module that I'm looking for here is called search rows, right down there. And what we're going to do is, after I select the correct account, I'm going to find the spreadsheet that I'm using, which in this case is specifically called example spreadsheet. There you go. We got it. And then I'm going to grab the sheet name. Sheet name is just the text down here. The table does contain headers. Leave everything else as default. We'll work on a filter in a moment, and then sort order, ascending, order by, and then we're not going to put anything for maximum number of return rows. If you don't put anything in there, it'll just select all of them. And then we are going to run it. And now we see the first parts of iterators and aggregators. So what a lot of people think is they think that iterators and aggregators, they're separate modules that you can kind of optionally put into a flow. This would be your iterator, this would be your aggregator. Notice how they have these fancy diagrams where with the iterator, one thing's coming in, 5 things are coming out. With the aggregator, 5 things are coming in, 1 thing's coming out. In reality, in make.com, many modules already have iterators and aggregators built into them. And so usually any module with the name search or list or filter, find, anything like that actually already has an iterator built into it. So you don't need to add another iterator. And the way that you find out is if you click on the module output rather, and if there is more than one bundle that is output from that module, then this is an iterator module. And so all that means is basically, if we were to add a scenario after a module after this, so let's just add a set multiple variables. The variable is just going to be amount, and then the variable value is just going to be amount. All that having multiple bundles means is if I click run once, pay attention to the bubbles above every module. The Google Sheets module runs once, but then because it outputs 4 different bundles, everything after that is running 4 times. And so we're consuming 4 operations. This is 4 module executions. And you'll also see that there are different operations here. So like this, it's 4 operations. Every time you have multiple bundles coming in as an input to something, you're going to run it basically however many times the number of bundles that have come in. And so you can think of an iterator as basically anything that takes in one bundle and then puts out multiple bundles. So if we go down to that diagram, kind of see why this makes sense now, right? Because we have an arrow coming in with just one bundle, and then it's outputting a bunch of different bundles. And the really important part about iterators is that basically for every bundle that you are then putting as output, every other subsequent module in the scenario is going to run for that bundle and for any other bundles that you're sticking in. Now, the reason why this is important is because if you're not careful, when you use iterators gratuitously, you can consume a fuck ton of operations. I've seen flows and I've built flows that unfortunately consume anywhere from like 50 to 500 operations per execution. And you can imagine if you're trying to run that every day, well, there's the whole, $20 or $30 a month make plan, right? So I usually don't actually like using iterators and aggregators for the sole reason that it becomes very operationally expensive to maintain. And there are usually ways that you could just chop up a big scenario into 3 or 4 tinier scenarios to achieve the same thing without having to do all of that bullshit. So that's my piece. A lot of people would probably disagree with me on, but hey. Now, cool. So we have basically one bundle coming in as input, and then we have 4 different bundles coming out. And what you'll find is if you access a variable in a subsequent module, that variable will change for every run. So in the first run, it's going to go and stick in 3583 because we're sticking in the amount here, right? So the first run is going to be 3583. Second run is going to be 194.5. Third run is going to be 95.91. The fourth run is going to be negative 38.5. It's a different, the variable is different every time because we're basically running this anew. And let's say I wanted to just add another module here to really drive this home. Let's just say that we have another variable that we're calling double in a subsequent module, and then we're just multiplying this by 2. Then I run this again. Notice how we have 3 modules, but this is 9 whole executions. We ran once, we got 4 bundles as output to the first iterator module, and then we had 4 runs for the second module, runs for the third module. So be careful when you're making flows with a lot of iterators and a lot of aggregators. So anyway, that's that first scenario when you're just using a built-in iterator. What I want to do now is I actually want to take a little bit of data and then I want to iterate it just outside of this, just so you guys can see what an iterator, like the actual iterator module does. And so I'm just going to use this set multiple variables as my flow. And then I'm just going to call this example array. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a really simple array. And then I'm going to show you how if your module doesn't have iterator functionality built in, but you want to give it iterator functionality, you can just use the iterator module. Super simple and super easy. So what I'm going to do, this is just a quick and dirty way to like make an array. You can use a bunch of different functions to make arrays. All you do is you go over here to the array tab. But I know a really simple function is just split. And then as you can see, it actually shows that exactly as an example. So I'm just going to do this. And then I'm going to separate by comma. And so what this is going to do is this is going to take in one string as an input, and then the output of this is going to be 3 different items in an array. And so I'm going to click OK. I'm going to run this puppy. And then now, as you can see, we had one variable as the input. Well, I guess this is counting the input and the output. But anyway, we had a string that was like John, George, Paul, all separated by commas. And then the output of that is this array that is indexed. The first entry is John, the second entry is George, and then the third entry, Paul. So pretty cool. What I want you guys to think about iterators as doing is basically an iterator will just take an array and then turn that into various bundles. And then an aggregator will take a bunch of bundles and they'll just turn that into an array. It's a really simple and easy way of kind of conceptualizing what these two things are doing. So great, now that we have this and we have an array, why don't we iterate over it? The way to do so manually, if you don't have a built-in functionality to your module, is go over here to Tools and then click Iterator. You need to define an array as your source. And so the array that we're defining as our source is going to be this example array. Be careful when you select this. What you need to do is select the variable with square brackets and no number in between. Otherwise, you're selecting an entry inside of the array. But we actually just want to select the whole array. And then to make this super simple, I'm just going to use this set multiple variables module, and I'm just going to add another example variable, and then I'm just going to set it to, as you'll see, when you use an iterator, you'll have a couple of default variables that are always accessible to you: total number of bundles, bundle order position, and you'll also have the value of whatever it is that we're selecting. And if that doesn't make sense, this will. So we had this ran one time. The output was an array with 3 items, John, George, and Paul. We then fed that into an iterator. The iterator ran once because its job is to basically build a bundle structure. So you can think of it as it doesn't have to run multiple times, only runs once, does its job. As the input to this iterator, we had that array with 3 items. As the output, we turn that array into 3 separate bundles. And so what that means is now anything after this iterator is going to run however many bundles we have. And that's exactly what happened with this final module 6. It ran 3 times. The input to the first time, we're just setting a variable here, was the first item or the first bundle value coming out of that iterator module, which in that case was John. The second one's probably going to be George. And the third one, hopefully, will be Paul. There you go. So yeah, that's how iterators work in a nutshell and how you can incorporate your own iterator functionality into it. But why the hell am I talking about all this? I thought I was going to build something that is business ready and something that you'd probably do for yourself or your clients. So let's get into that by learning a little bit about the flip side of an iterator, which is called an aggregator. The simplest way to understand an aggregator is to go open a make scenario, get like a Google Sheets module like this, build out your own Google Sheet for whatever functionality you want, and then go down here to this purple tools button. And then as opposed to the flow control button with the array aggregator, much simpler way to understand it, go to the tools and then scroll down to numeric aggregator here. And I'm going to use this, I'm going to show you exactly why this works and how this works. Basically what we'll do is we're going to feed in every bundle as an input to this numeric aggregator module. So the source module is just going to be whatever the previous module is. In this case, we only have 2 modules, so we can only select the Google Sheets module, but just always select the earliest module, the one that is outputting all of the bundles that you want. And then you'll see here for the numeric aggregator module, you can select from a number of functions. And so these are pre-built. We could do an average, we could do a sum, we could do a count, we could select the max value, the min value, right? We have a lot of options here, but to keep it simple, I'm just going to use sum. And then the value that we're going to stick in is going to be whatever value that we want, like numerically aggregated. And so in my case, it's the amount. And just check out the magic that happens when I stick this in. That's what she said. As output, we have the 4 bundles as we had previously, right? And then all of those went into the numeric aggregator. And then look at what happened. We fed in these 4 bundles as input. And then what happened? The output just summed them all. And at the end, we only got a value called result. And so the way that an aggregator works is, again, it's just a flip side to the iterator. We have multiple bundles coming in. And then just like the diagram shows, we squash those into a single value coming out. You'll also notice that something's changed graphically in the make UI. And this is interesting. I don't think too many people understand like the nuance behind this. But basically, anytime you have like a gray sort of thing wrapping around a few modules, that's because the beginning of that module, beginning of that flow, beginning of that gray area is an iterator, and then the end of that gray area is an aggregator. And so because an iterator expands things into a number of bundles, and then an aggregator squashes that back into one bundle, any modules outside of that gray zone can't access anything inside of that except for the output of the final module. What do I mean by this? Well, let's make this a little more complex. Let's say hypothetically we have a set multiple variables module, we stuck it in the middle here, and then we had a variable that we just called double. We're going to grab that amount, we're going to do that mathematical operation we did before, and then we're going to auto-align these. What I want to do is I'm going to sum up the double value instead of the original value. And then I'm going to add another multiple variables module here. And then I'm just going to leave this as blank for now and then run this once. You'll see that everything is working as expected. Google Sheets module ran once. Set multiple variables module ran 4 times because this is simply operating per bundle, right? This isn't an aggregator module or anything. And then the aggregator took this as an input and then turned that into 1. You'll see that the values here are double what the previous values were. That's sort of to be expected, right? So the result is as well. Now, let's say we want to add the result and just stick it in this set multiple variables module, and we just wanted to like store that information somewhere. Let's just call this doubled result. Notice how the only thing accessible to me is a single module which is tools 7, which is this numeric aggregator. I can't actually go back and access anything from tools 8, and I can't actually access anything from Google Sheets. The reason why is because this module is not inside of that gray overlapped sexy area that it really wants to be in. It's not in the exclusive club. And so the reason why is, again, because everything in here is like, it's executing a bunch of times, and it would be impossible for you to reference a single value here when the whole purpose of this flow is to squash that into a value over here, right? This is going to run once, everything after this, but everything inside of here is going to run as many times as the number of bundles generated by the trigger. Okay, great. So why don't we actually use this now to build our summary metrics? We're not taking double as input, we are taking amount. Let's run this again for sanity. 287.74. And actually, let's do one more thing first. I added in 3 values that were in February. So 2/23/2024, 2/24/2024, 2/24/2024, and then one value that was from, or one row that was from March. And the reason why is because I just wanted to teach you guys a little bit of filtering while I was doing this. Let's say hypothetically, for the purposes of our flow that we're building, we only want to get dates within the current month. You can imagine how maybe we run this flow on the last day of every month. And the purpose of this flow is just to take everything from the beginning of the month all the way up to the current date or maybe the end of the month, and then just to add all of those entries up and then deliver that as like a cash flow report. So in order to do that, we'll use this Google Sheets search rows module. And if you guys remember at the beginning, I mentioned that there was a filter section. So we're going to implement a couple of filters now to do that. So I'm going to be filtering by date added. And what I basically want to do is I want to select only the entries between February the 1st and then the last day of the month. And the way that you do that is in filters, you can scroll down. There are basic operators, text operators, numeric operators. What we're interested in are datetime operators. So I'm going to select later than or equal to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to define a date. And I want that date to be the 1st of February, basically. The way that you do that is you head over here to the date and time tab, and then you make use of the now variable. And then you also make use of the set date variable. What this basically does is it takes in the current date, which is now. Make has a really complicated date string. If you check out the red text in there, like 2016-12-28T160306.372Z, that's its own like internal representation of what a date time is. But what now does is now just gets the current date time. So now is like 2/34, February the 27th, 2024, right? It would just turn that into whatever this long object is. And then all the other functions in this date tab, they know how to manipulate those variables, that format of datetime object, essentially. And so one of the functions is called setDate, and it basically takes as input that datetime object, and then it allows you to set the date of the month based off that date. And so if you feed it in February the 27th and you say, I want you to set the date to be the 1st, it'll just change the date to be the 1st, essentially. So yeah, that's that. And let me just run this right now, just to show you guys what that comes out to in practice. If you select the module and then you go to filter, it'll show you the operators that you've essentially created here. And you'll see how this O variable stands for the operator. So I'm looking at the date operator and I'm checking to see which dates are greater or equal to. And then this B here is the actual value that you're feeding in as your filter. So this is the source of truth, February the 1st, 2024, 1:35 p.m. This isn't like super accurate, but I'm not going to worry too much about fixing it. Ideally, though, you can imagine now if you were trying to build out like a precise flow, you'd want it to start at like 12 a.m. that day. But it's aside the purposes of this, so I'm just going to move forward, and then I'm going to build out another filter, and that filter is going to be for the end of the month. So I'm going to go find another datetime operator. We're going to say earlier than. Let's just do earlier than, and then let's make this March the 1st. How you do that is you go back to the datetime operator, and then you do add months. So add months, set date, and then add 1 month to that. And so this is going to take the date that we had previously, and it's just going to add exactly 1 month. So it's going to go from February to March. And then what we're going to look at is we're going to look at entries that are later than February the 1st and then earlier than March the 1st. And there's a little bit more nuance there. This is later than or equal to February the 1st, and then this is earlier than March the 1st. So technically, it should be February the 1st inclusive all the way up to March the 1st excluded. but I'm not going to worry too much about the nuance. But let's just check out that filter and see how it operates. Since 3 of these were in February and then 1 of these were in March, they should only operate 3 times. And that's what happened. So we only selected the ones that were in February, so it looks like the filter is working. And then we took those values and then we used the numeric aggregator to sum them up to 326.24. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to write an email to myself talking about how great I am. Now, this would be the email maybe that you're writing to your example client or maybe yourself if you're running a business and you want some type of summary metric. I'll leave it at drafts for now. Write the email address in question. I'll say your monthly report is within. I'll say, hi. I'm using HTML, so I'm going to use these BR tags to space it out a little bit. Your monthly cash flow, let's call this a cash flow report. Hi, your cash flow for the month of, let's have make get the date. So let's do now. Make has another date time function called format date. So we can take as input a date time object, which is that long number string thing, 2016-12-28, whatever. And then we can turn that date time into just natural language. Like we could make this say February the 27th or something if we wanted to. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to use format date. I'm going to take as input now, and then I'm going to take as output. And I only know this because I work with dates all the time. But if you want to learn more about this, head over to tokens for date time formatting here. It's like a make.com help page, and it shows you which tokens to stick in. But I know for sure that I just want to select MMMM. That'll stand for the month, so that'll grab February, basically. So your cash flow for the month of February is, and then I'm just going to select, and then let's say your net cash flow. Counting up all revenue line items and subtracting all expense line items for the month of blank is whatever. And let's see, maybe I can bold this too, make it look really nice and sexy. And then I'm going to add a few more BRs. Thank you. And then we're just going to pretend we're accounting or something. You can imagine you could actually build this out for an accounting firm pretty easily. I'm going to run this just to make sure it works. We're back here. We're in drafts. That was from the previous flow that I ran, so it'll be this one here. Yeah, there you go. Hi, your net cash flow for the month of February, counting up all revenue line items, subtracting all expense line items is this amount. Thank you, accounting. Great. That is our super simple and easy business use case. And then the last thing I'm going to do here, just while I have you, and you're all so interested in what I have to say, is I'm going to show you how to use the actual array aggregator module, which is very similar to what we just did here with the numeric aggregator. It's just in green, and I really like the color green. No, it doesn't have its own built-in function, but you can just add that function in later if you want. So okay, imagine we have an iterator over here, which takes as input one bundle, turns it into a bunch of bundles, in our case 3. But let's say we wanted to take those 3 bundles and then squash those back into one value. And probably the simplest way to do that is with the example that we provided earlier. Let's have 2 summary functions. One will be called doubled amount, which will just be amount, and then we'll do times 2. And then one will be called tripled amount. And for whatever reason, we really want to get these. We just need to multiply them by 2, for God's sake. And then we drop in an array aggregator feature. And basically what we want to do is we want to run this. We want to multiply all of the values by 2 and then by 3. And then we want to get all of those values at the end. Here's how it works. Well, first things first, as the source of the aggregator, when you're building out these flows for yourself, to keep it simple, always use the earliest iterator in the flow. What that means is the Google Sheets module here is the earliest iterator in the flow. It's the module that defines the number of bundles that are being created. So I want to use that as the source of my flow. Now, if I click OK, notice what just happened. We just added that gray outline and we did it around the Google Sheets module. I don't actually know, but I feel like if I select this, it'll only do it around here. So to keep your flows really simple, just anytime the bundles start coming out, that's what you want to encapsulate with your aggregator. Of course, there are probably going to be a bunch of make professionals in the comments being like, oh, well, that's not always true. I really don't care because I almost never use iterators and aggregators. Most other people really don't use iterators and aggregators. And this is probably just the simplest way to keep it all in track in your mind, unless you do software development or computer architecture stuff for a living. Okay, so next is target structure type. I select custom for this all the time, and pretty much everybody else will as well, so just leave that as is. And then the part that causes the confusion for people is this field, aggregated fields. And basically the way that it works is, so as input we had an array, right, or like a one bundle, and then as output we had three different bundles for this search rows module, right? And so what we're doing is now we're trying to quash that down into a single item, or a single array, basically. And so we're just doing the opposite of what we did with the iterator, where we turned one array into a bunch of bundles. Now we're turning a bunch of bundles into one array. And what we need for that array to have a bunch of variables, basically, or values for the stuff that we're interested in having. Because you can only access the last module in an aggregator, which is usually the array aggregator itself, you can select the values that you want to have accessible to you in that last module. So what I want accessible to me is I want to be able to access the doubled amount, which is here, the tripled amount, which is here. And then I also want to be able to access the transaction name, which is here, the amount, which was also here, and then the date added, which was here. And this is hypothetical. You could add as much information as you wanted here, all of the variables that are accessible. I mean, in our case, it's just a bunch of empty Google Sheets columns, so it's not really super important. But yeah, just to give you guys some freedom. And then if we run this, you'll see what we were expecting to see, which is that the iterator runs once. Any flows in the middle run the same number of times as the number of bundles. And then the aggregator runs once as well. And then look at the output of the aggregator. The input was 3 bundles, and each of those 3 bundles just had a bunch of values. And these are the values that we selected a moment ago with aggregated fields. We have the title or transaction name from here, the amount from here, and then the date time from here. These are titled weirdly, but don't worry too much about that, just a Google Sheets convention. And then we had the 2 variables that we picked from here, like doubled amount and tripled amount. And you can see that we had this for all 3 of the bundles that we fed into this flow. Then the output is just a single array. It's one bundle, a single array, with 3 collections inside of it. And so we've taken 3 separate bundles that were all flowing on their own, and then we've just quashed those back into a single array, which is now the output. And now we can do anything that we want with that. Maybe we want to add, we want to add the doubled and the tripled amount to get like the 5 times amount or something. And when we run that once, you'll see that now everything after the aggregator only is run once. I don't really know why that happened. Oh yeah, I just stuck them next to each other. I probably should have added a plus, but whatever. I think you guys get the point. Okay, great. So that is how iterators and aggregators work in make.com. I hope you guys enjoyed the business use case and the way that I tried to make it really simple. I'll be honest, guys, you're probably not really going to use iterators and aggregators more than once in any flow. If you find yourself building flows and like every single flow is an iterator or aggregator, just ask yourself if you're building things that are too unnecessarily complex. Ask yourself if you can just divide that into 2 or 3 scenarios instead of just one, because usually what happens with these iterators and aggregators is the flows that you build as a result of them are just super unmaintainable and they can just take a boatload of your time. All I care about is building revenue performance systems that make money, keep money, and allow you to keep more of the money that you are making, obviously. And a big part of that is just the time you're spending maintaining and updating and error fixing systems. So I like to avoid that as much as possible. And I hope that you guys have at least gleaned that from all the other videos in our course. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys got any questions, leave them below as a comment. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks.